Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the Quranic Reflection Show. I'm your host Waqas Mirza, and as always we're joined by Sheikh Noorud-deen Rashid. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, today we just want to touch upon the topic of shaking hands with the opposite gender. This seems to be quite an issue, especially in our society, where people seem to be some of the opinion that you can't do it, but then there's another group that's saying, well, okay, let's rethink this, and is this actually allowed or not allowed?
Yeah.
So when you're ready, Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Rabbi yassir wa in ya kareem. Let's start with a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This hadith is recorded by Imam At-Tabarani in his Mu'jam al-Kabir. It is considered to be a Sahih hadith, where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لأن يطعن في رأسه أحدكم بمخيط من حديد خير له من أن يمس امرأة لا تحل له. For one of you to be stabbed in the head by an iron needle is better for him than touching a woman that is not halal for him. Okay. So the hadith is incredibly clear. This is obviously one hadith, and I chose this hadith because of its clarity, and it's dealing with the issue head on and directly. Other than that, there are so many verses of Quran, so many hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that generally teach us that gender interaction in Islam, we are very conservative with regards to it. We don't freely socialize with members of the opposite gender that, we don't have a relationship with. Obviously with your spouse it's completely different, and with mahram relatives it's different. But, it's very clear in Quran and Hadith that when it comes to non-mahram relatives, meaning relatives that you don't have that freedom of interaction with, non-mahram females from a male perspective and non-mahram males from a female perspective, you don't have, that kind of close blood relationship with, or it's not your spouse, then we are very conservative. Okay, this is mentioned throughout Quran and Hadith, but this particular Hadith is dealing more directly with what we're speaking about today, physical contact. And the point is, with members of the opposite gender, physical contact is prohibited. Okay, except once again with the spouse, no doubt is permitted, and with one's close blood relatives like mother and sister, etc., it's permitted. Now, beyond that, even with one's cousin, okay, physical contact is prohibited because the cousin is considered non-mahram. Okay, so it has that greater strictness. So it's very, very clear that it is prohibited. Now, and this is the case across all four madhabs in Sunni Islam according to their strong opinions, their sound opinions. So is there really room here for a valid difference of opinion for people to say, well, actually it's allowed? No. Okay. Some of the justifications that are put forward, we'll speak about those later on, inshallah ta'ala, but let's just understand the issue itself. But let's give a clear answer to begin with. Is it permitted for a person to have physical contact, shake hands with a member of the opposite gender? No, it is not permitted. Just to, explain it a little bit further, in every society, even non-Muslim societies, with regards to interacting even with the same gender and the opposite gender, when you meet somebody, there are boundaries. Okay, and the point is, in many societies, those boundaries are not really crystal clear. Whereas Islam, alhamdulillah, and this is the point of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to clarify things for us. Islam is crystal clear with regards to this, that, there's just no physical contact. And, in the current context, there's, in our society here in the UK and in other parts of the world, there's a lot of discussion nowadays about what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. Rightly so. Absolutely, these things need to be discussed, no doubt about it, even though they may not be Muslim and following Islam. But, again, still need to have some appreciation of what's appropriate and inappropriate when members of the opposite gender meet or greet each other. So, there's a lot of discussion there, and there's a lot of grey area. Okay? And this is the beauty of our deen, alhamdulillah, just makes it crystal clear. So, there are discussions nowadays about, well, obviously shaking with non-Muslims, obviously the shaking hands is fine, but then what about embracing? Can you hug? Can you not hug? Is that going too far? Is it not going too far? Well, what about, sometimes people when they meet, they kiss each other on the cheek. Is that allowed? Is that not allowed? So, there's a lot of discussion with regards to that. And that's the point here. When we say, as Muslims, we don't shake hands with the opposite gender, it's not a matter of, men are better than women, so men are not going to shake hands with women, or women are better than men, so Muslim women are not going to shake hands with men, for example. It's got nothing to do with that whatsoever. And this is a common misconception. Sadly, this is something I've come across myself as well. People say, okay, so you don't shake hands with women. Is that because in your religion they consider men to be better and superior, so they don't do it for that? No, it's got nothing to do with that whatsoever. So let's dispel this misconception right away. It's not a matter of one gender being superior to the other or undermining the other. It's a matter of what's appropriate in terms of gender interaction. And Islam, as I said, alhamdulillah, on this issue is just very, very clear. It just cuts out all of the the discussion and the controversy, if you like. It's just, that's it. There's just no physical contact. And again, another misconception maybe worth dealing with right away is it's not we don't say, oh, it's haram because we're Muslim and they are kuffar. Okay, disbelievers, and they are not Muslim, and that's why it's completely prohibited to shake their hands. It's not. That's not the case. We don't have widespread fatwa that say, oh, a Muslim man, when he goes on a job interview or meets a non-Muslim, it's haram to shake hands with this non-Muslim man. If it's the same gender, we don't have an issue. We have an issue when it's going across the genders. So this, again, let's make this crystal clear. This is an issue of gender interaction. It's not an issue of gender superiority, that this gender is superior to the other. It's not an issue of, or we're Muslims, we're not going to have any physical contact with non-Muslims. If there's the same gender, Muslim women will shake hands with non-Muslim women. Muslim men will shake hands with non-Muslim men. And it's simply an issue of cross-gender interaction.
Just to add to that, as you said, it's a gender thing. It's whether you're Muslim or not. A Muslim man cannot shake any females.
Yes, thank you. Allah Most High bless you. Just to clarify that. So a Muslim man is not going to be able to shake hands with a Muslim woman or non-Muslim woman. No.
There seems to be this thing about when people say, oh, we're not shaking hands, and then you've got some Muslims saying, well, they're just kind of extreme Muslims. They're a bit too strict.
Yeah.
We're okay with it.
Yeah.
So we're not kind of uniting in ourselves as well.
Yeah, this is really one of the most challenging aspects of this, and this is really what makes it very, very difficult for Muslims who want to adhere to this religious teaching. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's clearly the religious teaching in Islam. We don't have physical contact with the opposite gender unless there's a necessity. There's a female in front of you about to collapse, okay, and you stop her hitting the ground and harming herself. Yes, of course that's permitted. That's necessity, okay. But when there's no necessity, we don't have physical contact with the opposite gender. Now, so that's clearly the religious teaching here. So for people to say, oh no, it's allowed for this reason and that reason, again, I'm going to go into a bit more detail regarding that, but let's deal with this first. One of the most challenging aspects of this is when you've got Muslims, exactly as you've said, they'll comment on other Muslims, oh, we shake hands. They don't. They don't really understand. They don't understand the religion, or they might not use these words, but they give the impression that these people are a little bit extreme. And especially in our environment right now, that's a very dangerous thing to say or impression to give regarding others. And this is a really dangerous trend here in the UK. This is a really dangerous trend, that things which are the mainstream position in Islam, it's being presented as some kind of extreme position. We got this regarding music, for example. Or it's extreme Muslims who believe that music is prohibited. Inshallah, maybe another time we'll do a radio show on that as well, inshallah, to clarify the position. But the general point I can make here is the mainstream position in Islam is that music, with a few exceptions, or musical instruments with a few exceptions here and there, are prohibited. Now, but that's very, very dangerous. That makes, as Muslims, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah number 2, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ, and assist one another in piety and righteousness, and do not assist one another in sin and transgression. We're supposed to be helping one another. Okay, if we're, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ, we should be, but if we're, for example, not very observant with regards to an aspect of the deen, and other people are, we shouldn't turn against them. We shouldn't turn other people against them either. We should just hold up our hands and say, look, this brother, this sister, this person is observant, and I'm not so observant. This is my shortcoming. I'm the one in the wrong here, not this person. We've completely flipped it. Too often you have Muslims commenting on others that, they'll be asked, well, you shake hands and such doesn't. Okay, what's going on? And the comment will be, well, they don't really know, or they're kind of backwards essentially. That's the point being made. Or they've got extreme, this is incredibly problematic, and no Muslim should do this. And the ayat of the Holy Quran, but the ayah I just quoted, Surah Ma'idah, is very, very clear. You're supposed to assist each other in goodness. Okay, and not assist each other in sin. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ. Now,
so you mentioned about people attacking others, and some of the other justifications given is like saying, it's just a cultural thing. It's not that we don't mean anything by it. So can we look at that and say, yeah, it's just in the culture, and we can do it?
Yeah. So again, what I feel will make this a lot easier, and is the correct thing to do, that we just say, look, this is the Islamic position. Now, I'm not going to pretend this is an easy thing. I've been in these situations myself, especially when I was working as a teacher. You have situations where you have to either meet colleagues, or you have parents' evenings are particularly difficult, and it can get really quite difficult, and people sometimes don't understand, and you try your best, inshallah ta'ala, to make them understand. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. Okay, it's difficult, but we do ourselves a disservice when we start presenting it like this. You see, what we should do is make it very, very clear. It is prohibited to shake hands with the opposite gender. Now, and anybody who, for whatever reason, fails to adhere to this, be honest with yourself. And be honest with other people. Just recognize this is a mistake, this is a shortcoming. One of the worst things we do, and this again is quite widespread nowadays, one of the worst things we do when it comes to these kind of challenging, difficult issues is, rather than, recognizing and remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in this life to be tested. There are going to be difficult things, and the way to deal with difficult things and challenges is try your best. Remind yourself there's reward in doing the right thing, inshallah ta'ala. The worst thing we can do in these situations is just, it's difficult, let's change the ruling. Okay, yeah, it is haram, but let's start trying to work out some way of making it halal. You see what I mean? And that's so much worse than the sin itself. For a person who doesn't shake hands but says, no, it's okay to shake hands, but I just don't do it. Okay, this person's in a much worse situation than somebody who does do it and then says, look, I recognize it's a problem. I recognize it's an issue. So the correct approach is what? Even those people who fall into this sin, okay, don't mislead yourself and don't mislead others. Recognize this is wrong. It is prohibited in Islam. I'm going to try harder to avoid it. Sometimes, in that particular moment, I feel embarrassed, or I find it difficult, or I find it awkward, and I just fall into it. Make tawbah. And again, this is a problem. When you start giving fatwa or start saying, oh, it's okay, when are the people going to make tawbah? When are they going to seek forgiveness for it? Okay. At least when you stick to what the actual position is, you make it easier for those who are actually being observant and adherent to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You make it easier for them. You don't commit the major sin of changing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you'll make tawbah. This issue is something I've discussed with many people, okay, and even scholarly people as well who are working in institutions where they come across these situations all of the time. And the more reasonable response I've heard from them is they'll say, look, I know it's wrong, I know it's a sin, I fall into it now and then, and I make tawbah. I don't try to justify it. I don't start propagating and telling people it's okay. And that's the point. I will not say, yeah, just do it and make tawbah. Nobody has the right to say that. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying try your best to avoid it. And if you fall into it, don't fall into it. But if you fall into it, make tawbah. Okay? And do not try to start justifying that it's okay and it's permitted, or this circumstance or that circumstance. That takes us to the final thing we'll speak about today on this issue, is that justifications that are used. Oh, it's just a cultural thing. Okay, so I would ask such people, look, is the deen there to guide culture and to move culture towards the right path, or is it the opposite? Is it the case that, the deen, whenever culture changes, whenever culture moves, our deen changes? Okay, and we bend the deen and we stretch the deen to be in line with culture. Which of the two is it? You see, yes, we know, no doubt about it, that certain things in the deen are left open, and then, yes, cultural norms can dictate aspects of it. No problem, inshallah ta'ala. But I'm speaking about a situation where the Quran is clear regarding something. The Hadith is clear with regards to something. There's no room for that to change due to cultural norms. Okay? If that was the case, the mission of the Prophet ﷺ would have been a lot easier. The Prophet ﷺ came into a society and culture, there were a lot of things that were wrong. Okay, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't say, okay, let's just change the deen to fit with the culture. The Prophet ﷺ taught the people, look, what you're doing here is wrong. And it upsets people. When you tell them what you're doing is wrong and it's against their culture, it upsets them. But the point is, it's the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you're going to do. Okay, and that's the point. This is not our deen. I know a lot of other religious communities behave like this. You see, I don't want to name particular religions, but people are aware of these kind of things. This particular religion for centuries has been saying this is not allowed. It goes against this verse of the book, this verse of the book, this verse of the book, and now suddenly it's allowed. What changed? Did the book change? No, social norms changed. So what dictates your deen is not the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the revelation you've been saying for centuries is clear. Okay, what dictates it is social norms. And that's not what Islam is. Islam is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on what He's revealed. Not worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on what's easy and comfortable in any given society at any given point. And then when what's easy and comfortable changes, then the deen changes. It is not how it works.
I just want to mention a point, how you said earlier about, in some cultures, kissing on the cheek is fine, and, some hugging. And then if we do go down that line and say, oh, it's just cultural, then where do we stop? Do we start then hugging and kissing? And if it gets something extreme where, 50 years down the line, they're doing something completely out there, so to speak, do we now follow that? And again, sadly, people, when we go down that route, we will follow it, because right now it might seem abhorrent to us. Oh, how could we allow that? No, we'll never allow that. Right now it might be abhorrent. Okay, when society changes, we'll change with it. Our mindset will change with it. And again, that's the point. In certain societies, as I said, they just shake hands. In other societies, they hug and they kiss. Okay, so, where are we going to draw the line? Oh, we'll draw it here. Why don't you draw the line? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drew the line. That's what being a Muslim means. Why are we going to change that? Because society is different. And then they get their own one, and they get their own one, and they get that. What's the point of the revelation then? If everybody's still just basing everything on their cultural norms, what role does revelation have? We as Muslims, mashallah, we're very proud to say Islam is a way of life, Islam is a way of life. But just pause and think about what that means. That means that it will provide guidance with regards to every aspect of your life. We're not like certain other religions where the deen is just about how to perform ritual worship and it has nothing to do with anything else. No, our deen, mashallah, is encompassing. So
just to end with this point then, so, for people to say, oh, it's allowed because it's just a cultural thing, when culture contradicts deen, it's not allowed. Okay, we've done a whole talk on culture and religion, refer people back to that, inshallah ta'ala. It's not allowed. Okay, to say it's just a cultural thing, therefore it's okay. No. I heard that there was a famous sheikh who was giving fatwa that, it's allowed because people feel bad if you don't do it. Okay, please show me where in our law we have, be it in Quran, be it in Hadith, be it in the madhahib, that we say that something which is clearly haram becomes halal because somebody's going to be upset. If that's the case, then everything is now, and there's no prohibition left. Okay, every prohibition is going to upset somebody somewhere along the lines. Yeah. So that's it. Nothing's prohibited now because if it upsets my colleagues, if I don't drink with them, they're all drinking. I'm not. They're going to feel awkward. They're not going to feel happy. Yallah, that's allowed as well. What else are we going to allow? It's just absurd. But this is what happens. Culture has a massive influence on human beings. And then the mistake we make is we use that, or we take that influence and allow it to change the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is not permitted in any way whatsoever.
What about if there's a necessity, a real necessity?
Yeah, real necessity, no doubt about it. As I mentioned, if somebody's about to collapse and you stop them collapsing or something like that, no doubt, the deen makes exceptions itself. There is that concept of necessity. There might be other, obviously there's not a blanket ruling, but there might be other very specific cases, very specific circumstances. This particular individual knows, more or less as a matter of fact, if I don't shake hands with this person, I'm going to lose my job. Okay, or I'm going to be, in other societies, not here in the UK, but, if I don't shake hands with, I might be thrown in prison, or this might happen, or that might happen. Yeah, those kind of situations, the deen allows for that. That's not a matter of culture, that's a matter of necessity. Darura, we call it in Arabic language. The deen has some leeway when it comes to necessities.
And one last question. What if the person of the opposite gender is really old? Does that make a difference?
Thank you for raising this. Allah Most High bless you. Yes, where the scholars mention, I speak with confidence from the Hanafi madhab, the Hanafi, they said it's permitted to shake hands with an ajuz. Ajuz is an incredibly old woman. They don't define it by age exactly, but some incredibly old woman, if somebody was to shake hands with her, it would be permitted. Why? Because we have evidences to suggest that's permitted. But other than that, the rule mentioned here is applicable. And we'll end with this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith number 5288. And again, it's clear evidence against saying, oh, somebody might be upset by it. In this hadith, Sayyidah Aisha speaks about the bay'ah that the Prophet ﷺ used to give, they would just pledge allegiance. And the allegiance, the men they used to pledge was, they used to shake hands with the Prophet ﷺ and pledge their allegiance. Okay, but that wasn't the case with the women. Sayyidah Aisha mentioned in this hadith that the hand of the Prophet ﷺ never touched the hand of a woman. Okay, and obviously this is speaking about women that it's prohibited to have physical contact with. Never done so. Now, somebody might argue, well, some of the women might be upset by that. Some of them, they might want to touch the Prophet ﷺ's Mubarak hand. Okay, or they might feel, well, the men are doing it one way, we're doing it another way. Okay, there's nobody more sensitive, more kind, more gentle than our Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam didn't think, well, it might upset somebody, let me just go ahead and shake their hands. No, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam didn't do it because it's the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can't change just because somebody may be upset. Now, once again, let's clarify this point. We don't, in Islam, we're not there to purposely upset people. As much as we can, we don't want to upset people. But when you got a clash between the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this person not liking it, then I'm sorry, we have no choice. Okay, this person not liking the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is his or her problem. Okay, you should like the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, for us, we have no choice here but to submit to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and obviously do it in the nicest possible way. somebody, a member of the opposite gender, puts out their hand to shake hands with you, in the nicest possible way. It is an awkward situation. People can get upset about it, but you do it in the nicest possible way, inshallah ta'ala. Don't turn to them and say, "Oh, what are you doing? Get your hand away from me." Yeah. What's your intention here? You see what I mean? No need for that kind of thing. In the nicest possible way, you refuse. And practically speaking, what I found is that you can often, not always, often avoid the situations by keeping your hands busy with something anyway, carrying something, or that kind of thing. Then it's less likely to happen. But it's also it's an opportunity where you can explain to people that this is the ruling according to Islam. No.
Okay, well, we're out of time. Barakallahu khair.
Barakallahu feek.